Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Wednesday, August 13th. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris, Jed Lowry here with you. On this episode, we are going to dig in to the Boston Red Sox. You know, the team that's capturing headlines for weird reasons, but actually playing pretty well. We're going to figure out how good they actually are. Are they good? Are they very good? Are they dangerous even? We'll explore those questions here in just a few minutes. We'll have a little bit of baseball news you should know, including a quick follow-up on Josh Hader. And the big question we're going to try and answer on today's show: how do players change over the course of the season? I felt like that was a great topic for us to explore because we're kind of in the dog days right now, post-trade deadline, maybe pre-stretch run right now, where you're either cruising because things are going really well or you're starting to grind because the season is starting to take a toll on you. So let's start today with the Red Sox sitting, I would say, somewhat quietly in second place right now in the AL East behind the Blue Jays, 66-55 entering play on Wednesday, a 70-51 Pythagorean record. So they've slightly underperformed, at least based on run differential. 4.5 games back of the Jays right now. I just wanted to ask you guys, what's working for this team so far this year? Because the lineup stands out as very good, especially by wOBA, tied for fifth right now with the Cubs. And this is a team that traded away Rafael Devers, as we've said many times and talked about many times on this show. But where are they getting the extra production from? Sure, Alex Bregman was a great signing, but there's much more going on there. Roman Anthony looks like a superstar out of the box. What do you attribute their success overall as a lineup to this season? Where do you think the biggest surprises actually lie,
I was surprised to find this, but I just looked through some key indicators over the last 30 days, and I have to say, I think there's a little bit of luck going on here. Because if you look at their ranks in the last 30 days for hitting and pitching in key performance indicators, they aren't doing that well. They're 14th as hitters. They're 14th in walk rate, 20th in strikeout rate. They do hit the ball hard, and there's an important thing here because there's a couple key performance indicators that they do rank well on, and I think they care about these as an organization. But they hit the ball hard. But other than that, barrel 16%, BABIP 12%, WRC plus 14%. You said they were doing well in wOBA, but that you have to park adjust that. That park is very friendly to wOBA. They are 9th in clutch. Now, remember that, because we go over to pitching. They are 24th in strikeout rate, 21st in walk rate, 25th in Sierra, 7th in stuff plus. Now, that's a little bit like hard hit rate. 15th in location. They're allowing hard hits at 24th. They are 3rd in pitching clutch. Now, so I think there's two things going on here. There's if you're in the top 5, top 10 for clutch, that means that you're doing better in clutch situations than you would that you're doing in others. So I believe there's a little bit of luck in how they've been sequencing. They've been doing well in big moments. I know there's a whole discussion around clutch we can get to, but as a team, whatever you believe about clutch as a player, I think saying that a whole team is clutch is a little bit far, right? Like, you can believe that clutch exists on the player level, but then to say, oh, the Red Sox as a team have been clutch for 30 days seems like a weird thing to say to me. And then the other thing is they still hit the ball hard, and they have good stuff. Those I know are key performance indicators for them internally when they develop players, and so that percolating all the way to the top, I think, says that even though there's an element of luck, the way they make their luck is they hit the ball hard and they throw the ball hard, basically. They try to have good stuff and they try to hit the ball hard. So I think there has been a little bit of element of luck that doesn't show up necessarily in Pythagorean either, because this is how the runs are scored. Pythagorean is like, given all the runs you've scored, are you lucky? But then there's also like, how did you score those runs? And so there can be a little bit of luck underneath that. And I think that's true because another way of looking at it, let's say, take all the numbers out of it. Jed, tell me, how many batters do you fear in this lineup? Like, how deep do you think this lineup is? Let's take them out of Fenway and you're facing them in Kauffman Stadium and you're the opposing pitcher. How deep do you think the lineup goes? Yes, you're scared of Roman Anthony, but like, are you scared of Trevor Story? Are you, you're scared of Bregman, but are you scared of Trevor Story? Are you scared of the bottom of the lineup? Like, you try to like tell me what you think of that lineup in that sort of way.
Yeah, you have a group of players that aren't outside of Bregman, I guess at this point that I wouldn't say are household names. So I think when it comes to scaring people, no, I think Abreu is a guy that I'm cautious with. He's a guy that can hurt you. Duran is a guy that's dynamic on the base pass, going to get on base a lot, and I mean, leading the game in triples with 12 and 31 doubles. So here's a guy with top end speed that can also drive the baseball. So, but I think your point is valid about that ballpark. That ballpark plays well, especially for lefties who can drive the ball the other way. Bregman obviously can turn, pull in the air with the best of them. And so, I agree that park plays in their favor. But you could also look at it a way as maybe they built that team around their ballpark because they do get to play 81 games there. And DVR, you were asking, I think the biggest standout for me this year is Rafaela. Here's a guy who took a big step forward offensively. So, I do think you're right. There is an element of luck, which I guess, you could say luck one way, from an analytical perspective. I could almost say clutch from the baseball perspective, because I don't think it is a mistake though that you build a lineup that's balanced and the next guy, like that mentality is something that goes through the clubhouse. And if you believe in the next guy behind you, then you're going to be more effective because you trust the guy behind you. And that's easier said than done. And there's nothing to quantify it, but I can say that it's real, that when you're in the dugout and you see everybody else around you hitting, you start trusting everybody else, you kind of let go a little bit more and the game comes to you. So I genuinely believe that this team, I mean, given what their expected results are versus the real, and the fact that they're hitting the ball, not only are they hitting the ball, on average 90 miles an hour versus the league at 89.4, they're 90.6. Their hard hit rate is 45.5% versus the league of 40.9. So not only are they hitting the ball hard, they're hitting the ball hard more frequently.
Yeah.
I think the thing that's kind of jumping off the page to me, though, is when I look at this lineup compared to other lineups that we think are good. Is the Phillies lineup good? Is the Phillies lineup a lineup you fear? Phillies have a 323 wOBA, and the Red Sox at that 328. A park adjusted WRC plus, 105 WRC plus for the Phillies, 105 for the Red Sox. I think the depth is what's surprising to me, right? It's not the top end talent being there. It's not Roman Anthony being good, like I said before, but it's Carlos Narvaez not only being a great defensive catcher, but being league average with the stick. The improvements for Rafaela. We know he chases. We talked about him on that episode a couple of weeks ago where he looked at some of the more free swinging approaches. He's cut the K rate under 20%, and he's become more efficient as a base stealer. So when you improve multiple facets of your game and you brought a great glove to the equation all along, that adds some really nice depth to the lineup as well. You guys mentioned Jarren Duran. I mean, Trevor Story just being healthy is huge. He's had a miserable run during his time in Boston, just being able to shake off injuries. This year, he's done that, close to a 2-WAR season right now. Probably going to go 2020. He's 2 homers away from doing that. He already has the bags, and he's doing it with like league average sort of slash lines. It's not the best approach, but I think they're actually sneaky dangerous, at least on that side. I think the questions I have and the clutch I'd be more worried about is the getting timely outs with the pitching staff. Because you see it, like Garrett Crochet, the trade for him and the extension is brilliant because they have a true frontline guy. They have a top 5 in the league starter, a guy that can go out and just win a game for you anytime he takes the ball. That's great. And even though it looks like you see the progress from Brian Bayo and Lucas Giolito relative to our expectations, Sierra points a different picture because the strikeouts haven't been there. They both have sub 20% strikeout rates. And that's probably your number 2 and number 3 starter when you start to think about this team in a playoff series. And maybe Dustin May, maybe that was an overlooked acquisition at the trade deadline. He pitched really well against the Astros on Tuesday night. But I think my questions really bubble up to the surface more about the quality of this rotation behind Garrett Crochet, even though they've put up some impressive numbers so far. I'm curious if you see something, with Bayo or Giolito or even May in his brief time in Boston, that gives you a little bit more confidence in those guys as quality supporting members of that rotation behind Crochet?
I mean, if you believe in the offense scoring runs, then I think Bayo and Giolito and May are fine. I think that they will allow runs, but Dustin May and Brian Bayo have both been throwing cutters more recently. And they're not, it's a little bit like the Logan Webb situation where the cutter itself is not amazing, but they're both kind of east-west pitchers with good changeups and good breaking balls and good sinkers. So they're kind of east-west pitchers that added a pitch that doesn't move. The cutter that kind of stays true. And that's been really important for both of them, and has, since they've added the cutter, both of them have really good ERAs, at least. I don't know if it's changed their true talent completely as pitchers, but I believe in them as kind of 2-3 types. Giolito and Buehler are just super wild cards. I have no idea. I think, in a postseason series, there's likely to go 5 with 2, earned run or 2, or, be out in the first inning. So I don't really know how to really appraise them. I think that they've just been all over the place, really. And I've watched Giolito start where I was like, hey, this is going pretty well. And then he walked like 4 people in a row. And some of it was the fault of the umpire and some of it wasn't. So I don't know about them. And I think the bullpen follows the same sort of rubric where you're like, well, I believe in Aroldis Chapman, I don't know how this guy does it. 37, is he 37? 37
He's 37 years old. He's got a 30.4% strikeout minus walk rate, which is just ridiculous.
It's just pumping hondos still, dude, at 37. Yeah. And there's going to be a real conversation about the Hall of Fame for this guy. But the rest of the bullpen, I'm like, there's some good pieces here, and Whitlock has been great in the last month. 10 appearances, a 0 ERA, 11 appearances, 10 innings pitched, 0 ERA. Sparkling came out as PB. I guess if you believe in Whitlock and you believe in Chapman, there's something forming here. But I just gave you 2 names, like the Jordan Hicks. I don't know. I don't know how deep this bullpen goes. So yeah, I think there's some real questions on the pitching staff.
Yeah, right. I agree. I mean, I think the pitching is, my roads. I think the ceiling is just how far really the starters can take them. I do think that May and Matz too. I mean, Matz is an intriguing guy. He's been more productive out of the bullpen, and he can give them some length where, if these guys at the bottom of the rotation don't get the 5 innings, they can turn to Matz for a couple inning outing. And so I think that's
he's throwing 96 in relief. So
yeah,
it looks okay.
And that fastball velocity has always been there. I think it's just as a starter, it wasn't, it wasn't always consistent. But May is really intriguing. A little hard to predict in my estimation. I mean, he's the one thing that scares me a little bit about him is, the velo is down across the board. And then also it's the numbers, like the sinker in particular, which, that's really how he establishes himself. In 2023, the batting average against his sinker was 161 with a slug of 250. This year, when I did this, before his last start, at least, 286 batting average against the sinker this year with a 584 slug. And with a run value in 2023 of 8 and in 2025 -7. I mean, when the pitch that you're establishing yourself with is getting hit that hard, that's why it's a little hard to predict. But he's obviously still got great stuff. He's just getting hit really hard, and so he's just got to find a way to miss some bats again.
Yeah, I think there was some concern on the velo in that start against Kansas City. He was down to 94.8, which is the worst on the season. But in his last start against Houston, it came back at maybe to 95.6. So Yeah, there is some concern with the up and down nature and his injury history where you're like,
Right.
oh gosh, every time he's down a tick, you're like, what's going on with that? There is something interesting going on with the Stuff Plus numbers where, with Boston, he's had his best numbers of the year. And it's not necessarily because he's changed that much about the physical qualities of his pitches, but the new fastball mix of, with the Red Sox, he's been a guy who kind of throws the four seam, 20 to 30% of the time, the cutter 20 to 30% of the time, and the sinker 20 to 30% of the time. That true sort of 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 with the fastball. That is something he was not doing with the Dodgers. And our model, the Stuff Plus model, really likes it because fastball mix is actually a metric in the model. And the reason we did that was because I think as a hitter, you stand in the box against some pitchers and you expect a certain type of fastball. So if you stand in against Adam Ottavino, you expect a sinker. You see the arm slot, you see the crossbody, you're like, okay, I'm going to see a sinker. So when Adam Ottavino throws 5% four-seam fastballs, you have to give those fastballs credit for not being expected, for being different than the norm. And so you put fastball mix in to kind of be like, this is what his normal fastball mix is. How does this the four seam that Dustin May throws, not that great. The cutter he throws, not that great by themselves. But people stand in the box expecting sinker from Dustin May. So when he does throw the four seam, it looks a little different. It's a little bit unexpected. So I think that Boston's really leaning into that kind of multiple fastball philosophy that we've seen from like the Phillies and the Mets and from a lot of baseball right now, where they're like, hey, you've got your breaking ball and you've got your three fastballs. So, just play around with those three fastballs, see what they're sitting on, see what they're expecting. And, it's good pitching coaching, I think. But underlying how much has actually changed, like how different is he actually?
And so I would say that's going back to to actually pitching, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to just throwing it up there. And I think, obviously the stuff at the end of the day is going to be easier to predict what's going to happen long term, but still, like, when you have a guy who has now got three different fastballs. I remember first time I faced Blake Trainen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Blake Trainen, his sinker was probably off the charts with velocity and movement. And I remember facing him in Washington, but everything was moving down, right? It was hard and it was down. And so from an eye level perspective, it didn't make it easier to hit. It made it easier to lay off pitches because you knew it was hard and you knew it like the movement was either going to be slider one way, sinker one way, but it was down. And when I saw Blake, when he took a huge leap in Oakland, is when he added the four seamer at the top of the zone and he started to pitch as opposed to throw the sinker.
Yeah, in Oakland, he threw a four seam and a cutter, two very different pitches from what he'd been throwing before. Good point.
And just going back, to the bullpen, I guess I'm a little. I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. I mean, this is a bullpen that's got tied for third highest WAR in the game. They're 14th in innings pitched, so seemingly not overworked. And obviously with Chapman at the back end, dominant. Maybe the other guys don't have the same dominant stuff that Chapman does. But Whitlock still 11 strikeouts per 9 inning. Weiser, Bernardino not as high. Justin Wilson at 37, still highly effective. So I if I had to pick who I'm leaning on, if I'm Alex Cora, my starters or my bullpen, I'm probably leaning more to bullpen than I am starters.
Yeah, I guess I dismissed Greg Weiser a little bit, and when I'm looking at last 30 days, by something like Stuff Plus, they have 8 guys with above average Stuff Plus. I've always liked Jorge Alcala. He's hard thrower with a sinker. And maybe it's just not the names. Maybe I was reacting to the names, but
sure.
I still. like I don't think that I'd put this bullpen up against like the Mets or the Padres or you know what I mean? Like
no, definitely not stuff plus, but and just like the raw,
or just
but then
generally,
but I mean, then you look at Ryan Helsley has been with the Mets. I just saw this on a broadcast the other day that every single game that he's pitched in so far for the Mets, they've lost. And so, I think that's not Ryan Helsley is obviously a fantastic arm with still fantastic stuff. I'm just saying at some point, like the production does matter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they're doing that thing in Boston where the results, the ERA for that relief core, 337, Sierra 393. There's a huge gap there. Again, is it clutch? Is it luck? Is there something else happening that's at least bridging some of that gap? We're going to find out, I think, over the final 6.5, 7 weeks of the season. So the question on the Cryon, are the Red Sox good? Are they very good? Or are they dangerous? Where would you label them if you're trying to kind of assess them relative to other teams that we expect to see in the postseason this year, Jed?
I wouldn't. I don't. I guess I just don't buy into the starters enough to call them dangerous. I'd probably put them as a playoff team. But I don't know. I don't know if I feel like very good, like pushing between good and very good. Like I think they're a playoff team. And especially I don't see the bats. I don't see the bats dipping a whole lot. With how frequently they hit the ball hard. You could make the argument that they're actually underperforming some of their expected results. But I would put them in a good to very good position.
Yeah, it's the American League is interesting because I don't have a team that I would like that I want to like put my arms all the way around. You know what I mean? The Tigers, we just had a whole episode yesterday about the Tigers sort of up and down and some of their flaws. And, the Astros may be coming online with some of their pitchers, but, where is Yordan Alvarez? What's that offense going to look like? So I think there's a lot of flaws. I think the American League is wide open. So I would agree with Jed's general assessment that they're sort of good to very good. But I would also say that I'm not sure that there is, a clear like, a favorite for the World Series. So I think they could go all the way to the World Series. Like I think anybody that makes the playoffs in the American Leagues can go all the way to the World Series.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think you only have to be good to make the playoffs and go and even win the World Series. But as far as expectations go, I think that's why we tier teams into these little buckets. Like, how high should your expectations be as a Red Sox fan right now relative to a typical Red Sox team? This is probably a notch below some of the best Red Sox teams we've seen put together over the last 2 decades.
And even if you compare it divisionally to the Blue Jays, like the Blue Jays may not hit the ball as hard, but they make more contact than anybody in baseball. And their lineup has been going pretty well. So, when I look at the 2 lineups, maybe I pick the Red Sox, but I don't know if I pick it by a lot. And then when you took the rotations, I know that the Blue Jays don't have a crochet, but they have a lot of depth. They have 5 like number 3s, number 2s and 3s. So I think that I would take the Blue Jays rotation. And, honestly, I think I would take the Blue Jays bullpen as well. So, but if there is one thing that's most important, maybe it's the lineup. So I think it's an interesting comparison, but I think I would take the Blue Jays over the Red Sox, but that's not but like I said, I think it's a wide open field in the American League this year.
Yeah, man. The Yankees could still, with the trade deadline additions and a healthy Judge, they could get back to being the Yankees at some point in these final 6.5 weeks and continue to shake things up in this division. I mean, it's going to be fun watching the AL play out.
What you're hearing from out of New York, it makes it feel like the Yankees are terrible in their last place team, but they're a game and a half back of the Red Sox, and they're still in the wild card right now. So they got a big start from Will Warren the other day, who I think is pretty important for them in a similar way to the Red Sox, where they have some really good starters at the top. And what do you expect from like the Yankees 3, 4, 5s in terms of starting rotation? if those guys, if Luis Heel and Will Warren, come fully online, like that's a good rotation all of a sudden. And it should be a good bullpen, and it should be a good lineup. I think they're just hitting one of those parts of the year where everything looks terrible, and everyone throws their hands up and says, "This is not a playoff team." But I think it will be in the end.
Do you take? Let me add one final thing here. Do you take the Astros bullpen over Toronto or Boston?
That's a big question because we have some news today.
Yeah, I think without Hader, I would not choose the Astros ahead of them.
Yeah,
I think with Hader, I would.
Yeah,
and we talked about it a little bit. Yes, we didn't know that Hader is going to go on the IL. He's on the IL now with what they're calling a shoulder strain. We don't know when he's coming back. Brian Abreu is fine as an elite closer. Everybody moving up a chair, like described yesterday, and having to test that depth a little bit more. That's where an injury like this becomes problematic, right? It's not necessarily the ninth inning being the problem. It's now that like the sixth inning might be your weak spot, relatively speaking. So
if they make the playoffs, then they can play some games with like, Javier's our setup guy or something. They do have some rotational depth as people come back on. Like maybe Luis García is the setup guy. But from now until then, as they stand right now, yeah, I take those other bullpens over the Astros with this news.
Yeah, and I we talked about the Astros, a few weeks back when we were doing our scouting reports on them, and I like Brian Abreu. You're saying elite closer. There's no doubt the stuff is elite. I just you get him into a 1-game situation, and the possibility of the walk to me
is his command is so bad.
That's the one thing that scares me about him. And, I'm not, Hader isn't, he's not hitting, hitting dimes out there. But, Abreu just has, I just feel like he has the potential to walk more guys. He does. I mean, he's got 25 walks in 54 innings this year.
Yeah, you get that 12, 13, 14% walk rate sometimes. It's like the more extreme version of an Edwin Diaz sort of profile. So that can definitely come back to bite you if the command is particularly bad on any given day. But yeah, big injury for the Astros.
And it can really hurt you in terms of like, again, second mention of Ottavino today. It's interesting. Ottavino was telling me about how the worst season of his career, he couldn't find the zone, which happens from time to time. But the hitters all decided we're waiting till he throws a strike. Mm-hmm. And he said when he was going well, hitters got up there and said, "I need to hit the strike before he can get to the breaking ball." And you look at swing rates. Josh Hader has a 55% swing rate against. They're trying to get to something before it gets too deep in the count. They strike out.
Exactly.
Against Brian Abreu, 45% swing rate.
Yep.
They're waiting for him to throw a strike and prove he can throw a strike before they really get in the box.
I think I actually said that in our scouting report. It's like, Abreu, I'm waiting until he throws a strike, but then I'm you got to go. But I always say this, like none of this stuff happens in a vacuum, right? You've got, whether you're the hitter or the pitcher, there's somebody standing 60 feet away from you that has the same information that you do, that is trying to, keep the lights on, so to speak, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're trying to extend your career. You're trying to pay the bills. Like you're out there, and people know your tendencies. And as a hitter, if I know your tendency is to walk guys, I'm going to make you at least throw one strike to me before I get super aggressive. And same thing, and this is why I say that I've never played with a successful major league hitter that went up there and wasn't trying to swing the bat, right? Like nobody walks up there trying to walk, because if you go up there and you're just standing there, what does the pitcher have to fear? Right? Just, there's nothing in the back of his mind.
They just got to get in the zone. Yeah,
exactly right. Where you just add that element where like this guy might hit a rocket right back at me, or might hit a homer, whatever it is, that just, it changes the way that people, calculate the situation.
And Abreu, the way that this plays out is really funny. This is the best year for first strike percentage for Abreu, probably because it's one of the worst years for swing rate. So he knows people are coming up there waiting for him to throw a strike. So he's trying as hard as he can to throw strike one.
And now,
and it's
now
still
you start
below
to think,
league average.
But now,
it's still below league average.
Especially in the ninth inning, like it's the bumping, thinking about how hitters are a little more aggressive in the ninth, right? They're probably going to be looking for first pitch fastballs on him and just trying to ambush
might
him.
actually hit. They might actually ambush him. Yeah.
Yeah. So now
if he stays with the same approach of just trying to get one over.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be how does this get a lot worse for the Astros quickly scenario? That would be part of that script playing out.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of this connects to a big picture question we're going to talk about today. How do players change over the course of the season? Jed, just from the perspective of a position player, thinking about hitting and how your body felt over the course of the year, was there a consistent pattern? Was there a time of year where you felt better year over year? Like throwing the injuries aside, because those were obviously a part of the story too. But in a typical healthy sort of year, was there a part of the calendar that you always felt like you were more locked in?
I was a relatively quick starter. I got out of the gates quickly with my production, and then it was just a matter of fatigue for me. Once those dog days hit, I wasn't the most physical guy out there just in terms of like my actual like body measurements. And so I think it was always important for me to get off to a quick start where I felt my best, get my most production out of those first few months. And then, once the weather warmed up, I kind of, that was a little bit more cruise control. But I will say, starting out in the I think we're going to talk a little bit about pitchers being ahead of hitters early on. When I would come into spring training, there were times where I felt like I was never going to get a hit again. The first 10 or 12 at bats, it felt like I was like, I don't know how I ever did this before.
Yeah, because you can't get that feeling in the off season. Like,
no.
Like, even if you're doing lives or something, like you get somebody to throw to you, like, who are you getting to throw to you? Garrett Crochet? Yeah. And if Garrett Crochet is throwing to you, is he throwing like, August Garrett Crochet, or is he throwing like February Garrett Crochet?
Like not even February. And I do think too, as I got, I think at least anecdotally, it felt like towards the end of my career, I got a little bit better towards the end of the season. And I think a lot of that had to do with me knowing what it took for my body to get ready for the season. And, once I got to a certain age, it was like the sooner I started swinging in the off season, the sooner September came. Is like my thinking about it, right? Where like that fatigue really set in. And so I was, I would really like, I would kind of program it out where I was ramping up at the right time going into spring training, as opposed to feeling like I was, 100% like locked in, needing to win a job out of spring training.
Right. There's that element of being a veteran and having a contract and like
exactly.
having a role. Whereas, you're a kid, you're like, I'm going to swing as hard as like all winter. I'm going to get that job, dude.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
exactly.
I could see that. There's definitely, so I put together this chart of like, the different percentages. And if you look closely, you'll be like, wow, these percentages are not very different. But this is league average. And I think a small change in league average production on this level does mean something. And so if you're looking on YouTube, but I just have swing percentage for hitters, hard hit percentage, barrel rate, bat speed, over the course of the season, monthly splits for the league. And yes, the swing percentage in March and April is 47%. And when it peaks in August and September, it's 48.1%. You might think that's not a big difference. I think once you're summing up all the players, this is a meaningful difference. This is, it's hard to move the needle. Like we talk about things like, oh, remember the rise of the sweeper? Well, sweepers are thrown like 4% of the time across the big leagues. So when you boil things down to like league averages, I think this is meaningful. So what you see over the course of the season is batters swing more over the course of the season. They swing their least, and it's actually pretty remarkable that in March and April they swing 47%. May, it's 47.7, and that goes up to 48.1. So March and April is just a whole nother beast where people are just feeling their way through March and April, finding their way at their plate. Hard hit rate is actually not that bad once they swing. And barrel rate is not as bad as I expected once they put the ball in play. In fact, hard hit rate and barrel rate peak in May and June. But bat speed tells another story where, again, very small differences, but this is the entire league summed up. It starts out okay. Bat speed peaks in June and July. And then in September, there's a downfall. So you start at 71.6, June and July is 71.7, September is 71.5. So when you sum all this up, I think there's a weather effect. Obviously, balls fly better in the heat, and there's a getting used to the pitcher's effect. You're swinging more as the season goes on. And then there's a fatigue effect where your bat speed is going down in September because of things that Jed's talking about, of just how many cumulative swings have you taken? Like how the season is really long. It's 162 games. So these effects are all kind of going in different directions. And I think that's why we see June and July sort of peak, beginning of August. That's a peak of offense because they're figuring out the league. They're not fatigued yet. And the weather is hot. And so all those three effects come together to produce the most offense in June and July. I'm a little surprised to see that June really seems like the month. I would have figured it was more July, August, but I'm going to, maybe July is affected a little bit by the All-Star break. The All-Star break is going to cut your July in half. And, you may have to restart almost like March again, where you're like, oh, those first games out of the All-Star break, you're not swinging again because you're just like, whoa, oh God, I forgot everyone throws 98, So you have to get back online. So maybe June is just this uninterrupted. You're not tired yet. You're into your stance. You've got everything figured out. You're locked in. Maybe June is really the sneaky best month for offense.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think those first few at bats after the All-Star break, you're still getting your sea legs back. It really is like it's a shock, and that's just after a few days off, and it's necessary, but to rest up, to get recharge for the push. But those first few at bats back can be a little rough.
Yeah, I know. I know when we look at this chart and we see that the bat speed, hard hit rate, barrel rates all dipping in September. To me, that's fatigue. That's fatigue Agreed. On a chart, just shown in those particular metrics. I don't know how we do better. Like, do we have teams with load management that are getting better outcomes? Like, that would be kind of another way to maybe look at this in the future and say, hey, are the teams that give guys actual rest days, are they holding up better than I always use the Atlanta example, than the Atlantas that are just grinding the core as much as they possibly can? Because
there's a basketball correlation. As Tom Thibodeau is like, he plays like six guys and he plays them hard. And then there's always a question of, do these guys get injured in the playoffs? Do they get tired at the end of the season? So,
yeah, because the season is not optimized for player performance. It's optimized based on revenue, and was built years and years and years ago. It's the way it is because it's been that way for a long time. And that's what the business does. It's not designed to say, hey, how long do players feel really good? When do players hit a wall? If we were building baseball from scratch, a baseball season, a professional season, with that information, we'd probably come up with a 120 game season or something quite a bit shorter than what we play. But this is what we have. And I think managing it is going to be something that teams are going to do at varying levels of success. Thinking about it from the pitching perspective, I was surprised that the velocity didn't dip a little bit more in September. But one thought I had was that you have players being added to the roster. You have these injuries that become shutdown injuries in August and September, and you get your reinforcements from the minor leagues. And generally, the guys that are healthy and throwing hard in the minor leagues are going to show up. And probably, as Jed said in our meeting, they're going to come up with some adrenaline. They're going to throw hard. So I think that's maybe what kind of sustains the pitching numbers a little bit better than the hitting side. It's just kind of the shape of the player pool at that point in the season as well.
Yeah, there's a piece on Baseball Perspective back in the day by Mike Fast, who is now muckety muck for the Braves. I don't know exactly what his role is.
The title?
AGM or something. Very important person and a big architect when it comes to some of the Astros success. He came from the Astros over to the Braves, and he did a piece called Gain a Tick, Lose a Tick. And it was about, it was better than my math, because what he did was he looked at each player and he sort of compared players to themselves, as opposed to just looking from the league down, from like as league average. So if you put that chart up again, what he found was that velocity peaks in August. My chart shows a velocity peaks in June and July. And I think he had a bigger drop off in September, but you're right. If you're calling up guys, you're calling up young guys, you're calling up bullpen guys, you're calling up guys with velo to replace guys who are hurt, who maybe their velo was down. So I could see how velo would come up. I could see how that might affect the fastball percentage that I have there. I think the one thing that really stood out for me was I do think that velocity generally peaks with the weather. So sometime in July and August is when velocity peaks. I think it has something to do a little bit with like the hitters and bat speed, where it's like you're getting, it's not only the weather, the ball moves through the air easier in hot weather, but also just you as an athlete are kind of you're like, you've set yourself up. You're talking about, like, I think about my swings, and when I start my swings, like, I know pitchers are like, I want to be at my best in the middle of the season. Like, I want to be at my best in this chunk of the season. So, I think that's part of it. The one thing that I was really surprised by was just that the vert was at its lowest in June and July, fastball vert. And I think, Walker Buehler once told me that the Dodgers told him that you don't get as much vert on pitches over 95, probably because, there's less time to the plate for the pitch to actually move. But we also were wondering if it had something to do with, mechanics or just throwing that hard. Maybe you can't get as much out of the spin or whatever it was. There's a flattening out that Sean Doolittle talked to me about, a little bit of flattening out of these higher velo things. So maybe as you gain velo, you lose a little bit of movement. Maybe it's weather related. If the ball moves through the air faster, it also is not gripping the air as much. And so it's not moving as much. So that between those two effects, you probably have it explained. But that would be frustrating as a pitcher to be like, oh, I got my velo, but the movement isn't as good. And so for hitters who are like, well, I'm locking in now, and yes, it is a little bit faster, but it's also a little bit straighter. So when we looked at how Stuff Plus peaks, Stuff Plus peaks in June with the weather, but it's like the smallest of fractions. So, it's again, a lot of these effects disappear when you look at an entire league. But I would say that, right now, we're transitioning from peak performance to that fatigue starting to creep in.
Yep, I agree. I think that June, July is probably what's going to provide, at least during the regular season, the highest octane performance from both pitchers and position players. So that anecdotally and obviously the numbers would back that up.
I think it's also your team context probably plays into some of this too. Are you contending for a playoff spot? Are things going really well? Are things not going very well? That's going to make the job feel a little different on a day-to-day basis. And the psychological aspect of showing up every day can have a little bit of it can have a positive or a negative effect on how you feel. So I think that's probably harder to account for too. It's going to impact everybody differently. If you're showing up, if you're a Pirate right now, August 13th, right? You just lost 14-0 in Milwaukee on Tuesday night. Your ace was going. That was a skiing start, and you got beat 14-0. O'Neal Cruz ran into Jack Swinsky in the outfield and just went on the concussion IL. So there's some news for Wednesday. It feels like nothing you do is going right. And that's a team that's only 5 below 500 since they changed managers. But the season as a whole, because there was a part of the season where Don Kelly wasn't managing that team and they started something like 12-28 with Derek Shelton. that's still there. You're still carrying that baggage. I feel like that makes the job of an interim manager really difficult to get a team back on track. But I just think the performance for everybody on that roster becomes more difficult in the final 6 weeks because of just the context of what this year has been.
Yeah, I mean, everybody starts, looking after number one a little bit more.
Yeah, I was about to say, do I have a job next year?
Exactly. There's just, this is the human element of the game where people start, they start assessing their situation, and it's hard showing up with getting your butt kicked every day and being motivated and putting in that little extra work to stay, at peak production. So yeah, that all of those elements are going to play into how you show up to the ballpark and your motivations. And so you gotta really be able to internalize some of this and know what you're trying to get out of the season and your team and what your goals are.
The other angle here, I was going to throw this to you, is like statistically, how much do we trust the idea of first half and second half players? And I feel like the oldest narrative that I can remember for first half versus second half players, people always wonder if hitters, or even pitchers too, if you are from a place with warm weather, so that could be Florida, Georgia, Texas, California, or it could be most Dominican, parts of Latin America. I feel like it comes up with, these guys are from warm weather places. They'll be better when the weather's warmer. Like that, to me, intuitively, I'm like, sure, like if you grew up in a warm weather place, you'd be more comfortable in warm weather, most likely. But at the same time, year over year over year, eventually you get used to being a pro. You play where you play. You get used to the different changes of seasons because now you're an adult living in a different country or a different part of the country, and you eventually start to adapt to the place you live in. I feel like that narrative doesn't quite fit how actually living in a new place works. So there's that, plus the statistical aspect of how much do we even trust a month-to-month split or a half season's worth of data, even over a multiple year span? Like, is that even something that's viable aside from the questions about the narratives themselves?
Yeah, I mean, statistically speaking, I can let talk about that, but I will say, just from like the human element, you're saying living in a new place. It's like, okay, well, even if I'm living in Chicago, I'm only up there during the summer, really, and I'm still only there for 81 games. So you're not, it's not like these guys are living there in the off season and living through a Chicago winter and adapting to that cold weather.
Yeah, I think there's also a fascinating bit about we saw this like swing rate change, right? So Francisco Lindor, he actually has reversed it this year. He's usually been a slow starter and a great finisher. And what you found over his career is that his swing rates mimic the league average, where he swings the least early on and swings more as the season goes on. And he's started cold and finished hot for a lot of his career. This year, for some reason, he's reversed course and had a better start, and he's been having a difficult time recently. And this is why splits don't line up as a predictive, is that then you'll have a year where it's different. But if this idea that like people are swinging less in March and April, and they do this across the board, that has got to affect players differently. There are some players where swinging less is a really bad idea. And I think of guys like Robert. I think of guys that are kind of chasers or aggressive guys. I think of guys that don't have a great sense of where the zone is. Mm-hmm. So now if I tell you don't have a great sense of the zone, if I tell you to swing less, you're going to see a lot of called strike threes go by, and you're probably not going to get to your power the same way. And so this idea that like that in March and April players swing less, that's got to affect some players differently than other players. Some players, it's fine for them, and some players it's not. So players like Jed that like have a good sense of the zone, I think swinging less would be all right. You see more pitches, maybe you have a few more walks, maybe you don't hit for the best power, but it's also cold. Mm-hmm. And like You'll take a walk if it means not getting those jam shots in 50-degree weather.
See, what people missed out is you just play in Oakland for 1 year and then you adapt because you're playing in 50 degrees
It's cold
every
all
single
year.
night with the marine layer.
That was the hack.
But yeah, I mean, just if there is the swing layered effect, that's not going to affect everybody the same, and you could actually be a cold March, April player because swinging less is not good for your game.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm just looking at Lindor's month-to-month career splits. Like, yeah, slow starter in the sense that the first half numbers are a little worse than the second half. A 115 WRC plus first half for his career, 125 second half. It's amazing to me that with the reputation he has, his worst monthly split is not the March-April split. He's got a 111 there. He's got a 101 in June's. Just random, I guess. I don't think there's any particular
we just
reason.
said that offense should be peaking in June.
Yeah, you wouldn't look at that and go, "What? That means something." I'm gonna bench Francisco Lindor on my fantasy team once in a while in June. Like, you would never do that.
I would be like, I would love to see a switch hitter chart and see if switch hitters are affected by this a little bit more, because there's two swings they got to get going. Yeah.
I mean, I personally, like I said, I usually got off to a quick start, and I think that was. That had a lot to do with my approach, but then it also had to do with me kind of knowing who I was and what it took for me to get ready for the season. And fatigue played a bigger factor, where some of the other guys, fatigue wasn't much as big of a factor, let's say. And with Lindor, I mean, you got to look at the first part of his career playing in Cleveland, March and April, pretty frigid in Cleveland.
Yeah,
I mean, New York is tropical compared to Cleveland in March and April,
and still not warm.
And players
Exactly.
players also aren't just like automatons that are going to keep doing what they're going to do. They're going to adjust. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if maybe Lindor started swinging earlier this offseason, because he was like, "Man, why do I always start cold?" And he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna be more ready for the season."
Mm-hmm.
And that might affect him on the back end, because now he's slightly more fatigued because he started earlier. I mean, I'm this is conjecture to some degree, but this is this is how being a player works, right? Like,
Exactly.
You're like, oh, I see that split. That sucks. I don't want to do that again. I'm going to try and do something different.
Yep. And you remove one Jenga block, and
something else happens. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Jed's career split, a 135 WRC plus for the March and April. It's the best monthly split you have by a pretty healthy margin.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
104 in August, so like a little bit of like a second half bump.
Yeah.
And then 109 for the first half, 96 for the second half. You get the first half player label.
Yep.
It's
Exactly.
You're from a cooler climate though.
I like I said, I
Because
don't
you're just used to it.
hard to quantify that or really put something on that you could evaluate somebody, but I do think growing up in Oregon, it's just kind of how you played the game. The springs were.
My kids play in cold. My kids play cold. I was talking to Andrew Haney about this, because it's like 115 in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
All right. And I was like, are your baseball seasons different? Like, your Little League baseball season's different because you can't be out there playing? He's like, no, we just play.
Yeah, you play in the heat.
You're just out there in 115. You know how different it is from my kids who are about to play fall ball in Palo Alto? It's going to be like, 59, it's almost twice as hot in Oklahoma.
It's a different game.
Completely different game. But interesting stuff there. And a lot of different ways players change over the course of the season. And it's very, very individualized, I think, too. I think that the way Mike Fast was studying it explains why Mike Fast is in the position he's in, right? I think it's like a senior VP of baseball.
I've got my little calculator out. Beep, boop, 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 boop. And he's got the supercomputer. I've got this.
Yeah, exactly. A couple of news items before we go. Adolis García landed on the IL with a sprained ankle. Corresponding move kind of explains who's going to play in that one. Evan Carter came off the IL, so a little easy to see where the playing time goes in that instance.
It's a little rough for the Rangers, though, because they're making a push, and Garcia is a big power source for them.
Did you see that catch, by the way? Did you see the catch he made the other day? He dove. He dove and like kind of flipped it up and then caught it bare hand right as he was going to the ground. It was
like the glove got it and kind of threw it to his hand.
Yeah, well, like not on purpose. It just kind of bounced out.
Momentum
like,
kind of threw it out.
Yeah, like full speed, still like had the like wherewithal and body control to like almost spin on the ground and then catch it with his bare hand.
He's an athlete, man. He's good.
Yeah.
The Félix Bautista news is bad. The shoulder is a significant issue.
Yeah.
Maybe season ending. Is that what you?
Yeah, season ending for him. It's. I still haven't seen a result from an MRI though. That was like the thing that was surprising diagnosis. At first. They just said swelling. It's like, well, that's caused by something, and initially the imaging couldn't reveal what the problem was. So.
I just really don't want to hear shoulder surgery. That's bad outcomes. There's some speculation that usage was maybe a little aggressive. So one thing that Hyde had been doing when he was the manager was easing Félix Bautista back in off of Tommy John. And I don't think he'd used him in any back-to-backs or very few. And then Tony Mussolino, when he took over, used him in 7 back-to-backs in this first month with taking over the team. And, the record improved and the bullpen improved. So there's some speculation about that. I don't know. You at some point you have to be able to pitch in back-to-backs, and you'd think that, halfway through the season, you're back. You can pitch in back-to-back now, but didn't work out that way. And the other thing that I worry about with Félix is that it's such an extreme over-the-top delivery that I don't think it's necessarily very healthy. If you think about what you're doing to get to that kind of arm angle, you're really pushing that shoulder up into your neck. Like it's getting really crowded up here. And if you're not doing it this way, you're doing it with your back. So you're really bending your back to come through over the top like that. So maybe a couple things that are just working against him.
And this is where, the assumption of health, right? Like you're talking about building up at the major league level. And there's a trend of not getting it out and going on a rehab assignment, right? Just like, well, whatever it is. And we talked about this. I think we talked about this.
Yeah, work back. Even like Ohtani, like work back into it on the major league mound.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this with Spencer Strider, where like he had like 100 pitch count or something really, or 80 pitches, and it's like, well, why doesn't he just do that in the big leagues? Well, because the expectation is that you're healthy and that we're here to win, and so you got to
throw as hard as you can.
And,
and throw all your pitches
and you're gonna, and as a competitor, if Félix Bautista is put in a position where he's in the major league game trying to close a game out, or is it a big spot, whatever it is, and he's not built up appropriately, that's the recipe for injury.
Yeah.
So that's where you have to balance. You really have to balance, and I think I was advocating for Strider early in the season to have that start. Longer. Yeah, just to make sure that he's built up in a lower pressure environment where winning didn't matter as much. The adrenaline wasn't as high.
I know it's just one player, but Brandon Woodruff was coming off of a even worse surgery, than Tommy John, and we were spending time being like, why has he been in the minor league so long? This doesn't bode well, but. Maybe it was the good way to do it. Maybe, and now you're seeing Brandon Woodruff hitting velo, like better velo numbers as the game in each of the successive games. So, they really slow walked it, and it seems to be working for him. Zach Eflin, it's a back surgery, I think.
Yep, it's the lumbar microdiscectomy. I know that was Yelich had the microdiscectomy and came back from that really well this year. I don't know if it was the lumbar or a different part of the back, but. Out for the season for Zach Eflin as well, which it kind of seemed like that was trending that way, but that was the follow-up confirmation on that one. And then Miguel Vargas is back from the IL, so we'll see what he can do over the final 6+ weeks of the season. He's been kind of interesting, making some adjustments and maybe showing some signs that within the White Sox organization, there's a staff in place now that is making more adjustments and getting guys on the right track, which I felt like maybe was lacking for better parts of the last decade or so. So we'll see where it goes from here for
I think there was
Miguel Vargas.
Something interesting I saw on the box score was that Miguel Vargas was playing first base in his return. And old friend Curtis Mead was playing third.
Mhm.
So the White Sox lineup tracker is something to watch, because not only does it mean something for, people playing fantasy, or like, people caring about the White Sox right now, but that lineup tracker is going to predict who has a full-time job next year.
Yeah.
You're looking at what they believe in and what they're thinking of doing. So Miguel Vargas coming back and playing first base 2 games in a row, and Curtis Mead switching from first to third might mean that Curtis Mead is the third baseman of the future for them, or they feel good about that. And opening day next year, Vargas at first, Mead at third, and Mydroth at second, and Montgomery at short. Like they're trying to put together a lineup for the future.
Yeah, I like that they actually were getting both of the young catchers in the lineup together. Teal was behind the plate. Edgar Caro was the DH. I think that's a good way to actually handle the wear and tear of catching. If you want to be a little flexible at that spot, and you got
develop
two good catchers.
Both as hitters too. You want to keep them in the lineup. Working on their hitting.
Yep. So part of my flexible DH plan. I like it.
As bad as as bad as any team can be, you start to see this is what happens. I saw it in real time in Oakland a lot, which is like the rebuilds were fast there, and it was like you would be like, this team is going nowhere. Like, what is going on? There's nothing good happening here. And then 2 years later, you'd be like, oh well, they found Brent Rooker. And they found this guy, and they found, I'm starting to see it. Jacob Wilson, here we go. Like there's
Nick
a
Kurtz.
lineup, Nick Kurtz, here's the lineup. So as bad as the White Sox seem, like, how bad is a Vargas, Mydroth, Montgomery, Mead out the infield? It may not be the worst in baseball next year. It may actually be, like the 20th best infield.
I think what's interesting is you might have been accidentally recalling things I was saying about the A's about 2 years ago, where I was basically asking, have they finally lost their touch within that front office? There's so little turnover in the A's organization. I thought, they've done this successfully so long. Why didn't it work when they traded away, Sean Murphy? Like, why didn't they get enough?
They
return
definitely made some
for
misses.
Matt Chapman, right?
Some trades that were misses, yeah.
And it felt in 2023 like they had really left a lot on the table at that point. Lawrence Butler debuted that year and didn't look at all like the player that he did in the second half of 2024 and throughout most of this season. But they hadn't even drafted Jacob Wilson and Nick Kurtz at the time.
Right.
We were talking about them as maybe an organization that was just missing some things that had worked in the past. And now it looks like they're at least tracking back in the right direction. And how about Mr. Lodem himself, Jacob Lopez, again last night? Highest game score of the night, and there were some pretty good pitching performances.
And guess
on
what?
Tuesday night.
The model finally loves him. He has added some vert to his fastball, and he's starting to throw a sinker. So now he's a 3 fastball guy with the fastball, cutter, and sinker.
Yeah.
I know he only throws like 91, but Stuff Plus was finally like, okay, there's something going on here that we like. So, and he's been doing results wise, he's been doing great. So. I was just about to say that the one thing that worries me about the A's rebuild right now is just that park is so difficult on pitchers. They don't have that soft landing. They used to just get a lot of pitchers, and then they'd have a soft landing in Oakland, and they would figure out, who's good with like a nice confidence boosting soft landing, like lots of foul ground, and not that many homers, So instead, you've thrown Jacob Lopez into the fire, and it's worked. But you've also thrown a bunch of other guys in the fire, and they have really struggled. And so, I'm a little bit worried about how the Oakland rebuild will do in Sacramento, the Oakland style rebuild, because they have the lineup right now. If they were in Oakland, I feel like they would have the lineup to be good, and their pitchers would be doing better. I think they'd be doing better run wise. I know that doesn't make sense because you're like, true talent should be the same. But I think they'd actually be doing better win loss wise in Oakland right now.
It makes perfect sense to me, and I think that and their draft picks, right? You talked about Wilson and Kurtz, like they got Jamie Arnold, who this year who looks like he's got great stuff, and so that I think that they have drafted better. We talked about some of those trades, not returning the prospects that they've gotten in the past, but there's a young position player core that is worth watching.
Yeah, and I've been effusive in praise of Jack Perkins as a guy that they drafted in the 5th round, and maybe you'd have to turn him into a quality big league starter. Park is a good factor to consider when setting expectations, at least in the short term, for some of those guys. I think Luis Morales came up recently. Gage Jump is a guy that we like as a prospect. Like they are putting the pieces together again, and I just don't know how much success you can have in the Sacramento situation.
Yeah, a message to those young pitchers: steel yourself.
But I also love that Eno thinks the model adjusted to Jacob Lopez. I just hacked the model, dude. I just made it.
I just put my finger on it.
I just got in there and rewrote some code and made it spit out something that agreed with me.
Pitcher Jacob Lopez.
Yes, that's all I did. I added that line. I had a little help, but that's what I did. All right, we're gonna go on our way out the door. A reminder, you can get a subscription to The Athletic at theathletic.com/rates and barrels. We've got lots of great coverage for the stretch run. Fantasy football season starting up, no matter what you want. And Premier League starts on Friday, too. We should get a Premier League fantasy group going in the Discord. Maybe I'll get on that this afternoon. But no Brian today. He's enjoying the Giants game, so we appreciate all of his work throughout the week. He'll be back tomorrow. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Thursday.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.